Hi, my name is Lisa Hanscom, and we are at Welch Farm, located in our 1840s barn. We are wild blueberry growers in Down East, Maine. My great-grandparents, Frank and Mary Welch, actually started Welch Farm. They bought this farm in 1912 from the Thompsons. The Thompsons bought the land from the state of Massachusetts in the late early 1800s. They got married on Christmas Day and moved here. This was their honeymoon, I guess. So as my grandfather cleared the land, and he had sheep helping clear it, that's how we became blueberry growers, because they grow wild. So in about the early 1920s, he actually started commercially growing them and shipping them to Boston. My father, Wayne Hanscom, and his sister were actually raised here by my great-grandparents. When my grandfather died, my dad actually took over the farm at the age of 16. And he's been here ever since. And I've been helping for the past 20 years.
It's a hard life. I love it, but it's a hard life. A lot of work, not much thanks. And you get more of it as an enjoyment than you do monetary profit out of it. I enjoy every day here. I've worked in other places. I'm my own boss here. I can sit. If I'm tired, nobody tells me to go to work. If I know what I have to do, I can get up and I can go do it, and I can work hard, but I'm my own boss. I like that.
So there's a difference between the Maine wild blueberry and the cultivated blueberry. So the Maine wild blueberry grows native. They're wild. Mother Nature planted them. The Maine wild blueberry is actually a smaller berry and has actually a better taste. In fact, the Maine wild blueberry, there's over 1 million different varieties. Each variety has a different taste, a different look, a different color. Where if you're eating a cultivated berry, you have one taste because the farmer's planting one plant in a row. If you walk out into a Maine wild blueberry field, you're actually going to see they're close to the ground and they're not planted in a row, they're just cover a whole field. Harvest is really quick. When I was a kid, 2 weeks and it was over. People will come and want us to do something else and we have to tell them, look, we can't. We just can't do anything.
Takes a lot of hard work. There's so many things that you have to do, from taking care of the land, to marketing, to learning about all the new things that you can use. You've got to love doing it. If you don't, it won't work.
Besides the farm, I am the Washington County Emergency Management Director. That's a full-time job, and I am the school bus driver. Those are my paying jobs. My goal, though, is now to get the farm to a place where it can actually not only support itself, but to support the family.
I have people say, well, you got a lot of land, you're a rich man. Only if I sell it. I don't want to sell it. I want to have that life. I want to be right here.
My name is Ashley Field.
And my name's Jesse Field, and we're here on Field's Blueberry Farm, and we grow organic wild blueberries. My dad was commuting between Wiscasset and Augusta in the early 70s and decided that he wanted to find a place to look at a sunset. So he looked at a map and drove over Blinn Hill and was just blown away by the view, and wrote the woman that owned this piece of property then and offered to buy it. That was before I was born, and I grew up here. We picked blueberries, but it was a different scene than we had a manager who took care of it. After college for me, so that was like 2000, he and I sort of took over the operation and began managing it organically.
Jesse and I met probably 10, 12 years ago, I would say, and we moved up to the farm probably 4 years ago now. I was pregnant with Alakai when we moved up here full time. We were living partially here and partially in Portland at the time. And at that point is when we really took the farm from sort of a hobby and into a commercial business. I grew up on an organic dairy farm, so I've always been involved in agriculture, never fruit and vegetables, and never really saw myself doing fruit and vegetables. But when we moved up to the farm full time, I had just closed my previous business and was kind of looking for my next move. And as I started to learn more and more about wild blueberries, I started to get more interested. And then I said, I think there's something here. I think there's something that we can make of this. We can kind of turn it into a business. Like, do you mind handing over the reins to me, and I can kind of play with this and see, what we can make of it. And Jesse was like, sure, that's fine. He's a fisherman by trade, so he's gone a lot of the summer, so it kind of gave me something to do. It's really turned into quite the passion. I think that both of us like to live with the rhythms of nature. We're not 9-to-5 corporate ladder people. So we've both sought out careers or jobs that have allowed for that space and that flexibility. Wild blueberries they're a wild food. So we're not cultivating, we're not planting, we're not prepping the fields, we're not manipulating in any way. We're just coexisting.
Dealing with wild Maine blueberries is more encouraging them than trying to manage them in some fashion.
We're here more to support them and everyone else, turkeys and coyotes and insects and bees. We're here to support that whole relationship rather than block everything out and try to, take the blueberries for ourselves. I think a wild food in and of itself is a perfect food. It's not manipulated by humans or any sort of lab or seed. What's given to you is the product of that past year, and then in the blueberries case, 10,000 years.
There's a big lesson in learning to thrive where you're planted. The resilience that these plants have is really inspiring.
We can easily get sucked into society and having it mold and judge us, just like that can happen in farming. And so we try to, across the board, literally stay wild.
Well, I was born in Columbia Falls, Maine, where we are today, many years ago, 1935, right on the bank of the Pleasant River, in fact. Every summer I would rake blueberries. I earned my first bicycle raking blueberries, and in my school clothes and all that I earned raking blueberries. That's how I've always been in blueberries. The town was surrounded by blueberries, so I didn't have much choice.
I grew up in Cape May, New Jersey, fishing town. Parents were fishermen, and went to college, and I always wanted to be a farmer. And I read the book, Living the Good Life by Helen Scott Neary, and that was it. So I contacted an old feller in Blue Hill, his name was Rufus Candage. He helped me look for property up here. And I ended up finding a piece of property, a farm, way up in Coople. Didn't even know where the town was, but I had a job the next day and worked there, and I raked blueberries and started a little farm. And then eventually I got on at the college teaching. Another teacher and myself decided to do a history of wild blueberries. So we interviewed a lot of people in the industry, but everybody kept saying, if you haven't talked to Del Emerson, you don't know much about blueberries. So I said, well, I went back to the college where I taught, and I called him and I made an appointment, and both the other teacher and I went down and waited for him. And he pulled up in his pickup truck to Blueberry Hill, the only wild blueberry research station in the United States. And he said before he got out of that truck, he knew he was going to marry me. So I have to tell you, I'm very thrilled, right? We're on Blueberry Hill. And then that's a true story. To me, these wild blueberry lands are to Maine as the rainforest is to the world. And that's really true. They need to care about these wild blueberry lands. They need to preserve them and save them. This biodiversity is extremely important because the rest of the world is monocrop and everything. So this is so important that we keep these wild ones. And the whole ecosystem. Do you realize how many animals and birds, everybody loves wild blueberries? I don't care if you're a dog, a fox, a coyote, a bird, deer, bear, everything loves. When somebody came to the state of Maine, of course they look at the lobster boats and the coast, but they also look at the scenery. And that scenery, you have to remember, was brought to you by another Maine farmer. And those farms and that scenery needs to be preserved. And it's a bigger part of tourism as the lobster boats are in many, many ways. So in order to preserve that, people have to support it.
My name's Ron Howard. I'm the farm manager of Brodus Blueberries, which is owned by my mother-in-law, Gwen Brodus, located here in Hope, Maine. Brodus Blueberries farm is very, very old. It goes way back to 1799 when one of my wife's ancestors was given a land grant here for some property. Over the years, it's been expanded greatly as different pieces were bought up and added to the farm. Now there's a total of 800 acres, 170 acres of wild blueberries. When we got married, I helped out here on the farm with the family, off and on vacations and weekends and that sort of thing for years. I grew up on a farm and didn't really appreciate it at the time. In fact, I thought I'd never farm again as long as I lived afterwards. The fact that we now have our 9th generation, 5 of my grandkids, up here working on the farm is pretty amazing. Farming wild blueberries is completely different than farming any other crop in that they truly are a wild plant. No wild blueberry has ever been planted by a farmer. They've developed there. What farmers have done is remove trees, rocks, grass, weeds, and allowed those wild Maine blueberries to expand and grow into the fields. I think many of the consumers don't have any idea the difference between our wild blueberries and what you see typically on a grocery store shelf. Those are planted berries. They've been bred to be a certain standard across the board, but they don't contain nearly as many of the nutrient benefits that the wild blueberries have. They certainly don't have the variation, with the wild blueberries being so different from plant to plant. There's different sweetnesses, tartness. Every mouthful can be a little bit different. Because they are wild and because it's just native to Maine, to me it's just so important to recognize that there's a big difference between the wild blueberries and the cultivated high bush blueberries. Maine wild blueberry farmers are a unique breed, as I'm sure every farmer will tell you. But what I think is particularly important to know is that there are very, very few full-time Maine wild blueberry farmers. A lot of those farmers have side jobs or other agricultural products that they produce. It's a labor of love for many people. It's a market that has struggled a little bit, but it's starting to turn the corner here a little bit as people learn more and more about wild blueberries. And I'm hoping that that's going to make it so that the next generation for all of these Maine wild blueberry farmers will have a good reason to continue. None of us want to be the last generation, so we're trying to make a way to make that possible so it will continue.
I think just supporting farmers directly and cutting out all of the middleman has a huge impact on both the community and the farmer.
In fact, that's why we also created the Wild Blueberry Weekend as a way to get people out onto the farms, because I think if they get out here and they see the work that goes into raising this wonderful fruit, they'll appreciate it that much more and understand why they need to support their local farmers.
Seek out the products of these family-owned farms and support the organizations that support them. But supporting the produce that's produced on these farms is the most important thing.
Even with just the presence and the gratitude while harvesting, just the energy that you put into it really, in my opinion, affects the quality of the food. And so when you're trying to decide, do I want to buy this or do I want to buy this? I think that, going with the quality and the care in that product is really important. You're going to get something that tastes better, and you're going to get something that's a lot better for you.
I love history. I love being connected to my past, to my family, to my grandparents, and being able to know them without knowing them. But through the stories my dad told me, but also by being here, by seeing the old wooden blueberry boxes, it's like a circle. So, I mean, it's for me a way of being connected to my family history and kind of learning about myself and my past. And it's kind of cool to actually have that, to be able to touch the past. Most people can't do that. Most people can't. They can read about it in a book, but I literally can touch it. I can be part of it. I can actually see it. And I think that's kind of special.
The thing about Maine is there's like 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future all the time. There's so much history here. There's generations of industry, like the blueberry industry, like the lobster industry.
There's human beings on the other side of that,
Mm.